I only have 2 Game Boy Color games. I've got 12 total between both. I do not have an original Game Boy. I either am playing this stuff on a Game Boy Advance or the Retron Square on the TV. Game Boy is a cool system. I had it back when I was a kid. I had a decent amount of games for it. I have 2 games that were originally mine, but I had sold my Game Boy and a carrying case, which I still have as well, to a friend years ago. I think it was like 2017 or 18. He's like, "Oh, can you sell this stuff on eBay for me?" And it was the Game Boy stuff, and I was like, "Yeah, sure." But I kept the carrying case because those are kind of not useless, but nobody really buys them. And I kept 2 of the games that were originally mine, and then he had, so it's kind of nice to have 2 games that I had when I was younger. But anyway, I'll start with the two Game Boy Color games first. And I have some of these cases. Some of these I actually had that were my own. For a while I just had them for whatever reason. Scooby-Doo Classic Creep Capers. This is a nice little point-and-click game. It was released around the same time that the N64 one came out. This one is different than that. This is like, it's like a different setting, and like at the beginning is completely different. You're going to different areas and stuff. Obviously, it doesn't have the same graphics as the N64, but I played some of it. It was a pretty decent point-and-click game for sure. I want to actually play some of this on the Retron Square on the TV. I never had a Game Boy Color growing up. I've come across like probably 10 or 15 over the last 14 years at garage sales that I've sold. Game Boy Pockets and Game Boy Colors. Come across a decent amount of Game Boy Advances as well. SP specifically. But I never had them when I was younger. I do like the cases. Like the cartridges, I should say, not the cases. The cartridges for these things. But yeah, it's pretty fun. I like point-and-click games. And the second one is another game that came out on the N64. It's Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine. Now this version is closer to the N64 one. Just it doesn't look the same graphically, obviously. But I played the beginning of it. You're going to the same areas that you went to in the N64 game. It's the same story. It's just like I said, the graphics are different. And you know, voice acting and stuff. But another one I need to play on the TV through the Retron Square. Yeah, I just like these. I don't know why. I guess 98 was when the Game Boy Color came out. It's got that on there. I just like the see-through cartridge. I have trouble with that word sometimes. I don't know why. It's like particularly. I can't even try to say that now. Particularly. Alright, that's another word. But yeah. Everybody knows my love for this game on the N64. I love the little cases they had for these back then. I need to go on eBay and just buy like a lot of 20 of them. So, because this is a collection I do want to actually get more of. Because I liked it when I was a kid. And I had a decent amount of games back then, but it's probably the handheld I spent the most time with. I've put a lot of time into the Vita. The PSP, when I had it, I put a decent amount of time into, and the DS as well, when I had it, I would put some time in. The short period that I had the 2DS, I put a lot of time in. With the Game Boy, I put a lot of time in. Here's Radar Mission. Excuse me. This is a sub game, $3.99. I got this from East End Gaming, Oakdale. This is a submarine game. I do kind of like submarine games. This one's decent. I didn't play much of it, honestly. This one I want to get on the Genesis. It's cheap. Like Attack something 6.6 sub. Attack sub. Silent Service I have on the NES as well. And here's one of my original ones. And I forget how this got like this, but this was like this when I sold it to my friend Quirk. Cool little puzzle game. But you can see the damage to it. I might have stepped on it, might have fell on the floor, or got caught in something. This is a game where you go through like rooms and you gotta like figure out, you gotta like push blocks a certain way, you gotta get to the other side of the room, you gotta like turn things and push things and stuff. It's actually pretty cool. Made by Acclaim. Acclaim hasn't been around for a long time. Their headquarters used to be in, I think, Glen Cove on Long Island here in New York. Quirk. Tiny Toon Adventures Bab's Big Break. I got this for my fiance to play because I was like, you can use it on the Retron, so you can play it on TV. She liked the Tiny Toon game. She has the two of them on the NES, and we have one of the ones on the Genesis and one on the Super Nintendo. But it's similar to those games. It's a side scroller. This is the classic Game Boy thing here. This is on a few of them. Actually, I don't know. It might be on one more that I have. But I always like that for some reason. Tiny Toon Adventures was a cartoon. I think it started in the early 90s. This might have been the last game I've picked up for it, or it might have been the Bab's Big Break. This is a Super Return of the Jedi. So counterpart to the Super Nintendo game. I played some of this. It was actually pretty fun. It actually looked pretty good too. Because the original Game Boy was essentially like a pocket NES, except it was in black and white. But a lot of the games on the NES ended up coming out on the Game Boy, even games that were out, before the Game Boy had come out. But yeah, I do have this on the Super Nintendo as well. You can use Leia here, Han and Luke. I'm not sure if you can use, I think you can use Chewie and Lando in this one as well. I forget what I paid for this one. I got it off eBay. There's another one I got at East End Gaming for $7.99. Is Chase HQ. I didn't play much of this. You were beating. I'm pretty sure I was like racing against like a timer. I had to get to like a certain point in time. It looked like there's like branching paths and stuff. But it was kind of fun. Like I said, I was picking up these cheap. I went a little bit of a Game Boy kick when I was picking up as I dropped it. I was picking up these cheap Game Boy games. And this is one of the ones I got. These last five they're all in these things. Choplifter 2, another one I had gotten at East End Gaming. This was $6.99. I don't know why I didn't take the stickers off the bags. But pretty cool game. Like Choplifter, you gotta go and you're rescuing people and stuff. It was pretty fun. Another game that looks really nice as well. They did make a third. I think it was on the Super Nintendo. It might have been on other stuff as well, but this one's pretty cool. Here's a classic. This is one of my favorites. I picked this up at East End Gaming as well. I had it when I was a kid, but oh wait. I'll put a different game in there. I'll put this. $10. This one I paid $13 for, so I spent a little bit of money on this one. See, this is the other one that has the classic Game Boy down the side. I think this was an earlier. I think like the earlier Game Boy games, not all of them, had this on the side. This is like an arcade motocross, like a dirt bike game. It's fun. You get little nitros you boost and doing through loops and stuff. You're on a timer as well, but you gotta get gas. And sometimes you run out of little nitros and you use them up. You can't like get over certain loops and stuff. There's little obstacles. There's like sand that will slow you down and stuff. The second one was on the Game Boy Color, and the third one I have, Motocross Maniacs Advance. I have that on the Game Boy Advance. It's super fun, addicting, really good music in this game too. Actually, this is Konami. I've said this in the past. Ultra was their other company, fake name, because Nintendo, I guess, would only allow companies to put out a certain amount of games a year. So these companies were just like, okay, we're Ultra Games, the 7th division of Ultra Games. Like I think Metal Gear is from Ultra Games. But super fun game. If anyone's into handheld gaming, I haven't really messed with the Game Boy. I suggest picking it up. Even just picking up a Game Boy Advance SP or the original model Game Boy Advance, because the original Game Boys are kind of pricey. Actually, SPs are pretty pricey now too. You're almost better off getting the Retron Square and playing them on the TV. I don't know how much that sells for. I got it for my birthday. Was it last year or the year before? It was like $70 or $80. Well worth it. Because it's a really cool system. You have to get past. If you're playing it on a Game Boy Advance or on the Retron, it will up the colors. Because if you played them backwards on the Game Boy Color, because that was backwards compatible as well, it would throw the colors into the game. So it was maybe like 1 or 2 colors they would throw into these old Game Boy games. If you were playing it on a Game Boy Color, and now it's the same thing if you play it on a Game Boy Advance or the Retron Square. This one unfortunately doesn't work on the Retron Square. I picked it up the Japanese version. It's the same game obviously, but because it was like $15 cheaper than getting the North American version, but it's Super Mario Land. It's literally the same game. It's all completely, all the menu stuff is in English. But it does not work on the Retron Square. I can still play it on the Game Boy Advance, but I didn't realize, because the Retron 3 plays the Japanese cards for the Genesis, Super Nintendo, and NES, Famicom, Super Famicom, Mega Drive. It's Mega Drive everywhere except here. It's Genesis in North America, and it's Mega Drive in Europe and Asia as well. I don't know why they... I mean, Genesis, they're both awesome names. Like Mega Drive's an awesome name, and Genesis is an awesome name. But Super Mario Land's super fun. You can see it's different there. They have the different thing here. See, the NTSC version would be... It would have the Game Boy down the side. I think I did this in the cover art review for these, but this is a super fun side scroll. It still is fun too. You get some pretty cool powers in this one as well. It's just super fun with, once again, really good music as well. Two left. This one I got off eBay. It was like super cheap. But I love the first one. I don't think I knew they made a second one until like a few years ago. Because I think it was only on the Game Boy. And it's an NBA All-Star Challenge 2. I love the first game. I have it on the Genesis. I originally had it on the Super Nintendo back in the day. But I got it in 2020, right before everything shit the bed. I got it for the Genesis. It's the same game on both those systems, but this one actually adds a dunk competition, which actually works surprisingly well with the limited controls you have. But who do you got here on the cover? Patrick Ewing, Clyde Drexler, Karl Malone, Hakeem Olajuwon, Chris Mullin, and I think Dominique Wilkins is in the middle here. this one's actually really cool too. Actually, surprisingly, this is one that actually another one I need to play on the because the time I played it on the Game Boy Advance. I need to play this on the TV. These games, you pick a player from each team. Each team has one player, and you can do different modes. This one is dunk competition, free throws, 3 points. There's a tournament as well, like a one-on-one tournament, or you just play one-on-one with another guy. Like I said, I didn't know about this game when I was younger, because I had the Game Boy for a little bit, but I might not have had it at that point. And the last one is still one of my favorite games on the Game Boy, if not my favorite. And it's Lock and Chase. That's why when he gave me this stuff to sell, I'm like, I have to keep it. I love it too much. It is not an expensive game though, so I could have bought it anyway. But Lock and Chase is made by Data East. I don't believe they're around anymore. If they are, they're probably another name. You play as this dude, and you're like robbing banks, and there's little cops in there. It's like Pac-Man. You're getting little pellets, but you're getting chased by these cops instead of ghosts. But you can also, like, it's a little different where you can use little barriers. You have barriers you can use. You can go through, like, it gets harder as it goes on. Like, there's some levels where all the cops are sleeping, and if you hit like a little alarm clock thing, they will all wake up. You can go through certain walls on levels, and these are the ones where things are opening and closing, so you can trap guys in there, or you can escape, and sometimes you end up getting trapped between two people. It's actually really fun with another cool music in it as well. This is a fun puzzle game. I would recommend this. I think this is on other stuff as well. There might be like a Commodore 64 version of this. It's on other systems, I believe, though, also. I don't know if it's on other handhelds, but I'm pretty sure it's on. It's not on the NES, I don't think. Maybe there's an Atari version, I don't know. But it's a great game regardless. If you're into puzzle games and you have like a Game Boy, or you can find out some of the other systems it's on, absolutely pick it up. I like that noise. Even that, too. That's funny. That's why I like when I would watch people's collection videos back in the day. I would get like the ASMR, not knowing what it was back then. You know, we're talking 2009, 2010, whatever. Because I could be like people taking cases out of shelves and stuff and opening the case and stuff. Like sounds like that. I always liked. But anyway, it's my Game Boy and Game Boy Color collection. I do want to get more games for this. It's a cool system, and the games are fun. If you're into the older stuff, definitely check out some of these games if you have a way to play them. But anyway, yeah. Thanks for checking us out, and